Mavs fans, I feel for you. I really do. From the surprise trade of Luka Doncic to all the injuries that you've dealt with this season, now adding Kyrie Irving to that list, it's just been a brutal, brutal year. But the Sacramento Kings can't afford to show mercy, and they didn't in tonight's 122-98 beatdown in Dallas. We'll break it down right here on Locked On Kings.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily Sacramento Kings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, it is that time for another episode of Locked On Kings.
Hello and welcome into Locked On Kings, your podcast hub for Sacramento Kings coverage all season long. My name is Matt George. I have the privilege of being your host here. I'm a Sacramento sports anchor and reporter for ABC 10 News. And the pity is not tongue-in-cheek. And I'm sure Mavs fans, any of you tuning in and listening, you don't want my pity. You probably are saying, Matt, take your pity and shove it up your you-know-where. But it's been brutal. It's been a brutal season. It was hard enough for the Sacramento Kings to deal with the injury issues that they had at the end of last season when they lost both Malik Monk, who, by the way, was injured by Luka Doncic in the Dallas Mavericks, or the injury to Kevin Huerter, right, and how that kind of threw off the ending of last year's disappointing season. So I understand how frustrating that can be, plus the shocking trade that sometimes I still can't believe is real, even though I'm seeing Luka throw full court passes to LeBron James. I still can't believe it's real, and I have no emotional connection to the Mavericks whatsoever. I do feel for Mavericks fans, right? And when we saw Kyrie Irving go down with the injury in this game, the hyperextended knee, he just took a bad step. And I mean, if you're a little squeamish like I am with those kind of injuries, you don't want to see that video in slow motion because his knee it folds the opposite way of what it's supposed to. Now, Kyrie is an absolute beast, right? He steps to the free throw line, nails both free throws before being taken out of the game. Quick side note, shame on the NBA and NBA officials for assessing the Mavericks a technical foul. Like, I know it's not that big of a deal, and look, whether it's a security guy or a guy on the bench or whoever he was, right? Like, after Kyrie made the second free throw, it's not a dead ball. There wasn't a timeout. He walks out to ultimately help Kyrie off the floor. There was no timeout. There was no foul. There was no dead ball to actually initiate a substitution. So what the refs should have done is just said, hey, get back to your bench. Let's inbound this ball or call a timeout or do whatever we got to do to get Kyrie off the floor because we're not going to force him to play through this. And then you can come back out. There's no need to. I know he technically broke the rules, and under normal circumstances, look, you can't just step onto the floor in the middle of a game without there being a dead ball timeout. But in this circumstance, we all knew what the intentions were. We all knew that this guy was just trying to come out and help Kyrie Irving, who couldn't even walk, help him, or could barely walk, help him off the floor after a pretty serious knee injury. Like, what are we doing here? It's just unnecessary. I think it's one of those situations where, yes, it's in the rules, but the context matters. I just thought it was kind of lame, and ultimately it was 1 point that didn't really matter. Of course, if the Mavs had lost by 1 point in this game, I'm sure they would have been fuming remembering that play. Ultimately, it didn't really matter that much. I just thought it was bad form. But look, no one wants to see injuries happen to anybody. Of course, the Sacramento Kings dealing with their own injury in this game. No Domantas Sabonis, who will be out for at least a week, including tonight's game, this being kind of day one of that week, with his grade 1, hamstring strain, which is grade 1 is essentially mild. Right? That doesn't mean that he's going to be fine at the end of the week. He's going to be reevaluated. Hopefully he'll be back. Hopefully he'll be good to go. But hamstring issues are no joke, right? I think Tyrese Halliburton, if I'm not mistaken, with the Indiana Pacers, dealt with the same injury last season, and it lingered with him a little bit. So hamstring injuries are no joke. The Kings are going to make sure they're doing their due diligence. I promise you, Domantas Sabonis wants to be out there, wants to be playing, especially with the importance of this home stretch of the season. As you know very well, Domas does not miss games. So The Kings are dealing with their injury issues. You have the Dallas Mavericks, who of course don't have Anthony Davis, who hurt himself in literally his first game with the Mavericks. They're dealing with a plethora of other injuries. They've gone through big men like a revolving door because of injuries, right? It's just been, I feel bad for Jason Kidd, right? And Kyrie goes down with the injury and the camera goes to Jason Kidd and he just has this look on his face of just like, God, man, what's going on? So I feel for you Mavericks fans. I genuinely do. I feel for the Mavericks. I feel for the season. You never want to see any player go down with any kind of injury like that. That being said, the Sacramento Kings can't afford to show mercy, right? You play who's in front of you. And look, I understand that over a good chunk of Doug Christie's tenure here in Sacramento, the Kings have played either bad teams or shorthanded teams, right? When they beat the Dallas Mavericks earlier, that game a lot closer. It went to overtime, if I'm not mistaken, and DeMar DeRozan hit the game winner. Like, the Mavericks were shorthanded in that game. They did not have Anthony Davis in that game. They've taken on a number of teams that have been dealing with injury issues over the course of this season. The vast majority of the time, the Kings are winning those games, which is great to see considering in the past, Sacramento hasn't always done the best job securing games that they should be winning against teams that are shorthanded. But at this time of the season, right, with how intense the Western Conference playoff race is, the Kings and Mavericks were 9-10 in the standings going into this game here tonight. This is a massive game for both teams. So the circumstances suck. The realities of the situation suck. Do you wish the Mavericks and Kings would play each other at full strength and their injuries would not exist 100%? But the Kings can only play the team that's in front of them. They poured it on. They did what they were supposed to do. They blew the Mavericks out thanks to a dominant third quarter. At one point, they went on a 16-0 run in that third quarter. Every win is essential, and every single minute that this team can spend together building momentum for the remainder of the season and the very, very tough upcoming schedule, that's essential. So it sucks that it comes at the expense of a Mavericks team that it kind of wasn't a fair fight in a lot of ways after Kyrie went down. But you play the team that is in front of you. Doug Christie talks about the faceless opponent, right? Doesn't matter who they are. Doesn't matter if it's a good team, if it's a bad team, if they're completely healthy, if they're all injured. Does not matter. The faceless opponent approach is basically means what all that matters is the Sacramento Kings and how they play. And Christie's philosophy is that the Sacramento Kings need to try to play the same way every single night, regardless of the opponent, the circumstance, whether it's a home game or a road game, second night of a back-to-back, whatever. The Kings need to play the same way. And what we are watching over this now 4-game win streak for the Sacramento Kings, they are a season best 4 games above 500 now with this win. What we're seeing is this Kings team that is actively developing both chemistry and consistency together. And again, that is essential given the home stretch of the season. This is the time of year that you want to get hot. The Kings coming into tonight were one of 5 teams that were on at least a 3-game win streak. Those other 4 teams were the Cavaliers, the Knicks, the Thunder, and there's one more team that I'm missing. A really good basketball. Oh, the Lakers. Right? This is really good company to be in. The Kings, like 2 years ago when they made the playoffs, they are coming out of the All-Star break and they're playing really, really well. That's great to see. They're picking up games that they need to pick up. They're beating teams that they need to beat, especially shorthanded teams like Dallas, who lost their star in Kyrie Irving tonight. Over this 4-game win streak, the Sacramento Kings are averaging 120.7 points per game. The offense is at that high level that we expected it to be when the Kings acquired Zach LaVine and put this group together. But most impressive about this group, over this 4-game win streak, the Sacramento Kings are holding their opponents to 97.5 points per game. That's a differential of 23.2 points per game. The Sacramento Kings are holding teams to under 100 points per game on average during this 4-game win streak. I know the quality of opponent. I know guys are hurt. I know guys are out. Doesn't matter. Holding any team in the NBA under 100 points, is impressive. Having a points differential of 23.2, you're going to have a ton of success, obviously, when you are dominating games by that much. The Kings are dominating and blowing teams out right now. They're blowing the teams out that they are supposed to. Right? The Utah Jazz, hell yes, they should be beating them comfortably. The Charlotte Hornets at home, hell yes, they should be blowing them out. The Dallas Mavericks, unfortunately, with all the injuries that they're dealing with, even though they're neck and neck in the standings, yes, the Kings, even without Sabonis, should be beating and winning that game comfortably. And they're doing it. They're doing what they're supposed to do. That's all you can ask of them at this point, even for someone who's been so critical of this team, as pessimistic as I've been about this team. They are showing me and giving me exactly what I asked for. And this is a win that is coming off of a very impressive win where the Kings basically for the entire game without Domantas Sabonis beat I think the Rockets were full strength or close to full strength Rockets team who is, I think, 5th place in the Western Conference right now. At the time, they were in need of a win. So they're coming off of a really impressive victory against a good team, and they followed it up with another needed statement victory against a team that was shorthanded that they were supposed to handle their business against, and they did. Zach LaVine and Keegan Murray were fantastic in this game. Both of them caught fire from three-point range. Let's talk about LaVine first. The reigning Western Conference Player of the Week. It's the first time in his career he's won that award. Last week, the Kings went 3-0. LaVine averaged 28 points and shot 63% from three-point range over that week. My goodness. Well, that hot shooting continued for LaVine tonight. 22 points, 4 of 5 from three-point range for LaVine. What is the biggest difference that we're seeing with Zach LaVine from the first few games where he was getting acclimated and struggling and that three-point shot wasn't dropping to right now? The obvious difference is, yeah, the shot is dropping. But why? Is he getting better looks? Are the Kings getting him the ball in the spots that he wants the most? The things that I'm noticing that's most different with LaVine from how he started to where he's at now, one of them is obvious. He's just getting more comfortable playing with this team. He's getting more comfortable with this group and acclimating himself to this group. Doug Christie talked a lot about Zach wanting to be a good teammate when he came here in Sacramento. And the Kings need him to be a scorer. You can be a scorer and a good teammate at the same time. So he's understanding when to get his shot, but also when to get his teammates involved. I like that the Kings are not forcing him to play make, force him to be something that he's not. They're figuring things out, how to share the basketball and move the basketball amongst that group without still having a true point guard. Malik Monk is getting more and more comfortable with those major minute point guard responsibilities, and he's been doing well taking care of the basketball recently. And the Kings are getting stops. And when the Kings are getting stops, they get out in transition. Zach LaVine's deadly in transition. A lot of the threes he's been hitting have been pull-up threes in transition that just every time he shoots it, I think it's going in at this point. And he's also getting downhill, attacking the basket. We know how athletic and lethal he is finishing around the rim. So the Kings are getting stops and getting out in transition. That's a big deal too. Then you have Keegan Murray. Tonight, 18 points, 4 of 8 from three-point range, 5 rebounds, 3 assists. So between LaVine and Murray, they were 8 of 13 from three-point range. That's huge to get from two guys. There was a point in this game where, because we've been asking for Keegan to be more aggressive, right? And he's called for the ball before. Hey, I'm open. Ball. There was a point in this game where Keegan demanded the basketball. And he got it. He was shooting the ball well. I believe this was in the first half. The Kings got to stop, tried to get out in transition. Keegan Murray demands the basketball, gets it, pulls up for a good look from 3. Now, he missed the shot, but I don't care. He was feeling it. He was confident. He said, give me the ball. And his teammates did. They got him the basketball. Keegan Murray, really, really solid. Over this 4-game win streak, Keegan Murray's averaging 16.7 points per game. He's shooting 43%, 13 of 30 from three-point range, averaging 5.2 rebounds per game. Kind of common sense, but if Keegan Murray's playing good basketball, the Sacramento Kings are winning games. I think Tristy Rodriguez put it out there. When Keegan Murray scores 18 or more points per game this season, the Kings are 8-2. Sacramento doesn't need Keegan to be a primary scorer. That's not who he is on this group, especially with all the offensive options. We know what he can do on the defensive end. He was solid again. He took 2 charges. Klay Thompson had a miserable night, 3 points, 1 of 4 shooting from the field in 25 minutes. Keegan was largely responsible for that. He's still doing his thing on the defensive end. But if the Kings can get that offensive boost from Keegan and that hot three-point shooting, that high volume, high percentage three-point shooting that they know he's capable of, They're going to win a lot of basketball games. He is so essential to the success of the Sacramento Kings. He's been playing well over this 4-game win streak. No surprise the Kings are on this win streak. Haven't talked about DeMar DeRozan yet. He had a really solid game tonight, but I think I've identified a term for DeMar DeRozan's role with this Kings team. Kind of workshop it, throw it by you, see what you think about that. Plus, Jonas Valanciunas, a solid performance in his first start for the injured Domantas Sabonis. We'll talk about that and more still to come here on Locked On Kings. This episode of the Locked On Kings podcast is brought to you by DoorDash. NBA fans, get ready. When they swish, you save. Thanks to Dash Pass, every time a player drops 50 or more points at a game, you score a huge deal the next day. It's simple. Any player scores 50 or more in a game. I'm pretty sure Shai Gilgeous-Alexander did that tonight. So, anytime a player drops 50 or more points during this regular season, Dash Pass members get 50% off of an order, up to $10 off the next day from noon to midnight. You can take advantage of these deals for multiple different occasions, whether it's a game day feast, you have a late night craving, you need lunch on the go if you're stuck at work and forgot to pack a lunch at home, didn't have time in the morning, or you're fueling a watch party for a Kings game. Whatever it may be, all you have to do is sign up for Dash Pass and be ready to save. Again, any player scores 50 or more in a game, Dash Pass members get 50% off of an order the next day, up to $10 off. Just use promo code NBA50 from noon to midnight after a 50-point game on eligible orders at participating merchants. You must have an active Dash Pass account. Terms apply. Visit DoorDash to learn more. So I'm going to run this kind of term that I thought of while watching DeMar DeRozan play tonight, is like what his role or job is with this Sacramento Kings team, and see if it makes sense to you and if you like it or not. DeMar DeRozan is a mercenary for the Sacramento Kings. He's a hired gun. What I mean by that, and tonight, he had 20 points, 8 of 15 from the field, 4 assists, had another really, really solid game. Didn't go crazy, but didn't have to. Everybody knows who DeMar DeRozan is, right? He's not changing. Defenses know what DeMar DeRozan wants to do. It doesn't mean they can stop him, even though he gets everybody to bite on his pump fake and gets so many defenders to think they can block his shot without fouling him. They can't, and they foul him so much. He's just so good at it. But everybody knows who DeMar DeRozan is at this point in his career, 36 years old, right? We know what DeMar is going to do. We know what his job is supposed to be. We know what his primary skill set is. It's that isolation mid-range scorer. DeRozan's job or DeRozan's role on this Kings team is to be a mercenary offensive threat for the Kings, right? I think about it from, like, I'm a video game guy. I like video games. And when you play video games, you have like champions. Maybe it's like Marvel Rivals is a big game out right now, right? And sorry to you who aren't gamers, you're going to think this is stupid and lame. But Marvel Rivals is a game. It's a superhero-based shooter, and each of the heroes obviously have their specialties. There's the healer, there's the support, there's the tank, right? There's the DPS or the sniper, whatever. Right? They have their characters based around a role or a play style. And to me, I have this mercenary term in mind for DeMar DeRozan because it's not his job to be like a team player that's going to be a jack of all trades. Right? That's not who DeMar is. Doesn't mean he's not a team player. Doesn't mean he's not a good teammate. But DeMar is the guy that he comes into the game, you get him the basketball, he's going to score for you. He's a guy that you can pretty much pencil in 20 points a night with. That's what the Kings went out and got. They bought the services of DeMar DeRozan at this point in his career where he can still get buckets, but his prime is over. He can still get buckets for you. It's on the rest of the team. It's on the core of Monk, Sabonis, Keegan, and LaVine. Right, it's on the core of those 4 guys, plus I guess you could throw Keon Ellis in to kind of be the future and the foundation of these Sacramento Kings. Right, they are your pieces. DeMar DeRozan's like the power up, right? He's like that button you can press. He's the boost to go out and get you these, like, just go and get me my 20 points. So again, workshopping this in my brain, like thinking about what DeMar DeRozan is supposed to do and what he's supposed to be for this Kings team. Like I think forward towards the rest of the season, and I think of it this way. You can basically count on anywhere between 15 to 25 points a night for DeMar. Sometimes he'll have bad nights where you don't get that, and other guys need to step up and make up for that because the boost doesn't always work. Other times it's going to be a mega boost, and he's going to give you damn near 30 points, right? And in certain situations, like down the stretch in close games in crunch time, we've seen like the Kings like to lean heavily on DeMar DeRozan. There's times where they do it too much, like the New Orleans Pelicans game before the All-Star break where they gave DeRozan the ball, I think, a little too much down the stretch. But DeRozan's responsibility with this Kings team is just to go out and score and supply that steady offensive presence and also give them kind of an ace up their sleeve, go-to bucket, or at least a threat in a close game. And they're going to hopefully be a handful of very close winning games with winning potential coming up against the Cavs and the Knicks and the Thunder and the Celtics, right? Hopefully the Kings will be in those games to where they can really use DeMar DeRozan and his clutch gene to help them secure one or two or all of those wins. The rest of the team has to supply the defense. The rest of the team has to do enough offensively to where DeMar's 20 points is enough, and defensively do enough to where DeMar's 20 points or the offense that you're going to get from DeMar kind of puts you over the threshold. Not that DeMar is not responsible for playing defense and doesn't have to play defense at all. He does. He's required when he's on the floor, he has to play some smidge of defense. It's probably not going to be very good, but this is what we know about DeMar. He'll do his job. Hopefully he'll get some deflections, maybe get some steals every now and then, but defensively you can't count on a lot from DeMar. But the rest of the team, like it's the responsibility of Keon Ellis and Keegan Murray, especially on the defensive end, to make up for some of those lapses, even the lapses of Zach LaVine, and put themselves in a position to where DeMar DeRozan's 20 points is getting them over the edge. And what we're seeing with this group is that DeMar's still getting his buckets. DeMar's getting his looks. Zach LaVine's getting a lot more comfortable. Keegan Murray's shooting the basketball better. But as a team, the Kings are doing a better job defensively communicating and turning their defense into offensive opportunities. So it's a very long-winded way of me just kind of, it makes sense in my brain. I have no idea if it makes sense to you, but DeMar DeRozan is a mercenary for the Kings. He is the guy that is just the scoring, the points, that's what he's going to give you. He'll also sprinkle in some assists and some rebounds along the way. But the scoring and the points, that's what he's going to give you. The rest of the team, you know what he is. The rest of the team has to kind of fill in those holes, fill in those gaps. And we're starting to see the Kings do that. Another big reason why they've been able to do that, and I mean a big reason for why they've been able to do that, is the play of Jonas Valanciunas. On last night's Locked On Kings podcast, when I recorded it with my partner here at ABC 10, Kevin John, we talked about Jonas Valanciunas being a savior of the Kings season. If Domantas Sabonis went down for any period of time, even if it was just a week, before this Valanciunas trade, I would have said, oh God, the Kings are in big, big trouble. But Valanciunas is someone who can hold down the position. Tonight, 14 points, 6 of 15 from the field, 9 rebounds, 2 blocks. First off, if Jonas Valanciunas is shooting 15 times, I don't think he should be shooting 15 times a night, but if he's shooting 15 times to starter minutes, Domas, what's your excuse? Shoot the damn basketball. Get some shots up, whether it's around the rim or from three-point range or whatever. Get some shots up. You should not be shooting less than Jonas Valanciunas. To be fair, Jonas is taking on a Dallas Mavericks team that's very shorthanded at center right now. But Domas needs to be shooting more than Valanciunas does. I will say 54 of the Mavericks' 98 points were in the paint. So a majority of the Mavs points scored were in the paint. I'm pretty sure like 14 of their first 16 or 16 of their first 18 points were in the paint in this game. What does that tell you? Turns out, even though Domantas Sabonis is not a rim protector, that is not all his fault, right? The Kings giving up points in the paint and buckets around the rim is not all Domantas Sabonis' fault. Jonas Valanciunas is a better rim protector than the Sabonis is. He's not a phenomenal rim protector or anything like that. Certainly not up there with the Victor Wembanyama's and Jaren Jackson Jr.'s of the world. But he's better. And the Kings still struggle to defend the paint. It's because the breakdowns are still happening on the perimeter. But I digress. I like what we're seeing out of Valanciunas. And to be honest with you, we saw a moment where there was a Valanciunas-Malik Monk two-man game that resulted in A pick and roll, Valanciunas scores a post hook. Then they go down the other, this is in the third quarter. Then they go down the other end of the floor. Valanciunas blocks a shot. Kings come back in transition. Malik Monk hits a transition three. That began that 16-0 run that really helped the Kings put this game away. Right? It was a really, really encouraging stretch to see. I thought Jonas Valanciunas did a fantastic job. A fantastic job in his first start for the Sacramento Kings with Sabonis being out. Today's episode of the Locked On Kings podcast is also brought to you by Open Phone. Running a small business means that you're wearing a lot of hats. Your personal phone becomes your business phone, and before you know it, you're juggling customer calls day and night. And as your team grows, it becomes impossible to manage everything with just your personal number. That's where Open Phone comes in. It's the #1 business phone system designed to help you keep your work and your personal life separate. For just $15 a month, the cost of a few coffees, you get complete transparency and visibility into everything happening with your business phone number. Open Phone works through an app on your phone or computer and integrates with tools like HubSpot and hundreds of others. It also uses AI-powered call transcripts and summaries, so you'll have a rundown of your calls and action items the second that you hang up. And if you miss a call, no problem, because automated messages are sent directly to your customer, ensuring you never miss an opportunity to engage. Right now, OpenPhone is offering 20% off of your first 6 months when you go to openphone.com/lockedonnba. That's OPENPHONE.com/lockedonnba for 20% off 6 months. Openphone.com/lockedonnba. And if you have an existing number or any existing numbers with another service, OpenPhone will port them over at no extra charge. All right, so with this 4-game win streak, where are the Sacramento Kings in the standings? Well, they're up to 8. And as I've expressed time and time again, being 7th or 8th is way better than being 9th or 10th. For those of you who don't understand why, in the play-in scenario, being 7 or 8 means you only have to win 1 game to be into the playoffs. In 9 or 10, you have to win 2 games. The Kings finished 9th last year. They played the Warriors. They hosted the Warriors in the first game. That was great. They won that game. That means they advanced to play the loser of 7-8, which was the New Orleans Pelicans. The Pelicans won. They knocked the Kings out. So they had basically an extra life. The Kings did not. So if the Kings finish in 8th, sure, they don't have home court advantage for that first play-in game, but they do have kind of a get-out-of-jail-free card. If they lose, they still have another shot at it, and it would be a home game. If they win, they're in. 1 win, and you're in. So being 7th or 8th is an incredibly more beneficial spot to be in than 9th or 10th. To be completely honest with you, I wrote the Kings off for being in the top 6. I said I don't think they should be in the conversation. I don't think they should be focused on that. I just didn't think it was possible. Mathematically, there was more than enough of a shot, but I just didn't think this Kings team would be consistent enough to really contend for a top 6 spot and avoid the play-in altogether. Well, here the Kings are, a 4-game win streak. They are tied with the Los Angeles Clippers in 7th. Now, they're also tied with the Minnesota Timberwolves, who are in 9th, so they got to be careful there. But they're in 8th, tied with the Clippers for 7th, and they play the Clippers on Sunday in L.A., and they're only half a game back of the Golden State Warriors, who moved up to 6th. They won today. I think they beat Charlotte. But they're only half a game ahead of the Kings. And the Kings play the Warriors next week on Thursday. If Kings win that game, they win the series against the Warriors 3-1, and they have the tiebreaker. So they're in the thick of it. They're in the thick of it. Now, I'm not going to change my tune. I'm still not predicting the Sacramento Kings to be a top 6 team. I'm not. I'm not. But they're in it. They have more than a chance. It's right there for you. Go keep winning. What you've done is you've secured this road trip, a winning road trip, should I say. Right? You have the Denver Nuggets to end it. That's a tough place to play given the altitude. That's a true home court advantage over there. The Denver Nuggets are in a good established playoff team in the West. That's a tough game, especially without Domantas Sabonis. So we'll see how the Kings fare in that game. But no matter what happens, you've secured a winning road trip, which is always a good thing. And look, I still need to see more, right? Especially with this stretch coming up, this very brutal stretch that begins with the Clippers on Sunday. The Kings need to show me more, right? The Kings need to prove that they can stay afloat or even rise during a really, really tough stretch like this, a stretch that could potentially not necessarily bury their playoff chances. I think it's pretty safe to say, I think, at this point, knock on wood, that the Kings are going to be a play-in team to some capacity. But this is the kind of stretch that can secure you a 9th or 10th spot or vault you firmly into the 6, 7, 8 conversation altogether. But here's the thing, even with someone who needs to see more and is not fully convinced yet because of this upcoming stretch, I will tell you that they are doing exactly what they need to do right now. They are beating the easier teams to beat. They're handling their business again, like we've broken down. Short-handed teams, teams below them in the standings. They're handling their business. They're doing their job. That's exactly, like, what more could I ask for from the Kings? Could things be a little more polished? Sure, but I'm not going to be that nitpicky. This isn't a championship contender. Or they don't look like it. I guess stranger things could happen, but I don't think the Sacramento Kings are a championship caliber team. We're not talking about the Kings the same way you talk about the Boston Celtics, right? The Kings are doing their job. They're doing what Doug Christie has this team playing the right way and focused right now. What more could I ask for? I cannot still be a hard ass and still be super pessimistic when the Kings are on a 4-game win streak and they're handling, I mean, that Rockets win over the weekend was fantastic, but they're handling the games that they need to handle, that they're supposed to handle, and they're doing it comfortably. The Kings are showing me what I need to see right now. They're building themselves up a safety net for this brutal stretch going forward. I just need to see them continue it over the course of this stretch. Doesn't mean continuing a win streak, because they're going to drop some games here. They are. I expect them to lose to the Cavs. I expect them to lose at least one of that Boston, OKC back-to-back. I expect it. But by handling their business right now, they're giving themselves as much of a safety net as they possibly can. They're putting themselves into a position to where those losses don't necessarily have to be backbreakers for them. It's exactly what I wanted to see right now. So I acknowledge that with a smile. Speaking of which, speaking of smiling, I wanted to say thank you because this last weekend, funny enough, on Saturday when the Kings played and I didn't do a Locked On Kings podcast, I reached my 8-year anniversary with Locked On. 8 years of hosting the Locked On Kings podcast. This episode that you're listening to right now is episode 1856. Now, I haven't hosted all of them. This podcast was started in its infancy, in its very early very beginning, by Jason Ross from Sacktown Sports 1140, Kings radio broadcaster. Jason passed it on to me when it was still pretty young, and I've built it over the last 8 years and built with Locked On and grown with Locked On into what it is right now. But 8 years hosting this podcast has given me a purpose. This podcast has fulfilled that joy that I have for talking about and covering Sacramento Kings basketball. It's connected me with so many of you, just unbelievable people around the world who love and want to hear about and talk about the Sacramento Kings. I'm so unbelievably grateful, and I'm excited for 8 more years. And, I mean, Locked On, hopefully they don't get rid of me because I ain't going anywhere. I'm very pleased with this show. The show is my baby in a lot of ways, and so many of you have been so supportive. I know there are a lot of people right now that don't agree with what I'm saying and are not happy with the way that I've approached covering the Sacramento Kings this year or talked about the Kings, not happy with my pessimism about this Kings team. Hey, over the course of these 8 years, I've gone from pissing people off because I was too optimistic to now pissing people off because I'm too pessimistic. But this platform, I do not take for granted. I'm very appreciative of it. I'm very appreciative of your support. These 8 years have been fantastic for me, for my career. I've gone from radio part-time to television full-time over these 8 years as well. Got to do amazing things. Go all over the country covering Sacramento Kings basketball. Got to be there for the Kings' amazing season where they finally ended that playoff drought, right? It's just been unbelievable. I'm so thankful. So I want to make sure I express that. Appreciate your support, as always, of the Locked On Kings podcast. Can't wait to have you join me on the next episode. Until then, my name is Matt George. You've been listening to Locked On Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.